Well, hello there, everybody. My name is Tony Grillo. Welcome to my channel, Wisconsin Hugs. And I know that a lot of you people that are on my channel here are into true crime, just like I am. Love true crime stuff. And I thought I would share some true crime stories about Wisconsin that you may have never heard about. And this is one such story, which is a very fascinating case that happened here. This story was done by 48 Hours CBS News, and it was Erin Moriarty. She's a 48 Hours correspondent. She investigated the death of 31-year-old Nicole Vander Heiden for this episode, The Fitbit Alibi. And this is the story here. I was just going to go through, we'll just read it together. It's a very fascinating case. Millions of people wear a Fitbit or some kind of physical tracking device to log their exercise and sleep habits, but when a Wisconsin man began wearing one in 2016, he never guessed that it would provide an alibi and save him from murder charges in the brutal death of his girlfriend. The case that went on trial this past February in Green Bay, Wisconsin, this was in 2016, so it's a while ago, but is one of the first of many to come where high-tech devices will not only provide crucial evidence in criminal trials, but may prevent wrongful convictions. So here's a picture of this gentleman and his the lady that he was with, and Nicole Vander Heiden and Doug Dietrich. On May 21st, 2016, Doug Dietrich's girlfriend and mother of his infant son, 31-year-old Nicole Vander Heiden, was found beaten and strangled to death in a field a little over 3 miles from the home they shared. Dietrich, 35 at the time, had been with her just hours earlier. They attended a Steel Panther concert, followed by drinking and dancing. And Ashwaubenon is right, it's actually like in Green Bay, Wisconsin. They're like, it's kind of like Minneapolis, St. Paul. They're like right next to each other. In fact, the Packers Stadium is built, Green Bay Packers Stadium is actually built in Ashwaubenon. It's not even in Green Bay. It's actually in Ashwaubenon. So it's a nice little town. Green Bay is not at all a big city at all. And Ashwaubenon, same thing. It's actually a very small town. And so when the couple became separated, Vander Heiden went on to a local bar called the Sardine Can, expecting Dietrich to follow. When Dietrich failed to show, Vander Heiden began sending angry texts accusing him of flirting with other women. Yeah, apparently these two were fighting a lot, and that's kind of what made police suspect that maybe he might have been involved in her murder. At around 12:30 a.m., Vander Heiden, now drunk and angry, walked out of the bar and was never seen alive by her friends again. Dietrich and a friend drove around searching for Vander Heiden, and then they went home, smoked some marijuana, and as he later told police, went to sleep. Now this is the part that police didn't like about his report, because he waited until 4:30 in the next day, 4:30 in the afternoon the next day, to report her missing, hours after her body had already been found in the field. So the police had already found her body out in the field, and then a couple hours after, then he phones the police and at 4:30 and says, his girlfriend's missing, the mother of his child is missing. Brown County Sheriff's detectives interviewed Dietrich and later obtained a search warrant for the couple's home. Blood was found on the garage floor and in Vander Heiden's car, leaving investigators wondering if the missing woman had actually come home and had been killed by Dietrich, who then used her car to transport the body to the field. So basically, they arrested him on the spot when they found the blood in the car and on the floor. I guess he also had some blood on his boots. He had some boots out in the garage. So, suspicions deepened a day later when a neighbor across the street found a pool of blood and a cord. Now, why would this happen a day later? You'd think police would have noticed this. A blood and a cord across the street? I don't know. But I got to hand it to these police officers. They did get it right. They might have missed this one, but they did a great job in solving this case. Investigators believed may have been used to strangle the victim. Lead detective Sergeant Brian Slinger wondered if there was some sort of argument between her and Doug, maybe when she got home, and that somehow ended up in the street. At that point, Dietrich was the logical suspect. Although he denied killing Vander Hayden, he was arrested and jailed. He was actually he was in jail for 3 months, and all along he said he had nothing to do with her death, and no one believed him. And he missed out on her funeral, and everybody in the city thought he was guilty. All his friends, his family, his girlfriend's family. I mean, he was. Everybody hated him. He was a villain. But investigators wanted to wait on the results of the lab test before charging him with murder. Actually, they did charge him with murder. No, they didn't charge him with murder, but they held him in jail. That's what they did. Those charges never came. Less than 3 weeks later, Dietrich was released from jail after test results show the blood in the car wasn't the victim's. The blood on the floor wasn't human. He was a deer hunter. That's what's going on. And a partial DNA of an unidentified man was found on her clothes and the cord. So yeah, there was a DNA of another man was found on her body. What's more, now this is what really saved Dietrich's ass, so to speak. He appeared to have had an unconventional alibi witness. When he was being interrogated by the police, and then they were after they threw him in jail, they went back over the interrogation tapes because they wanted to make sure they got it right. They actually did think he had killed his girlfriend, but there was just something there that was bothering them. They weren't 100% sure, and they didn't like, they wanted to make sure they got it right. So they were, and I saw an interview with the police officers, so that's kind of why I know what they had said in that interview. But the police officers, basically what they did, they when they were watching the video, they noticed he was wearing a Fitbit, and they go, wait a minute, I wonder if he had that Fitbit on during that night when she had been killed. And so they went to him and said, hey, can we examine your Fitbit? And he's like, yeah, go ahead, because I'm innocent, and so he gave him the Fitbit. They analyzed it, and let's read on here. Sergeant Slinger said that he and others had noticed that Dietrich had been wearing the personal tracking device on his left wrist when first questioned by police at home. When the data on the device was downloaded and examined, it seemed to clear Dietrich. He had a few footsteps throughout the night, said Sergeant Slinger, getting up to go to the bathroom, checking on the baby, whatever. But his story that he told us was absolutely 100% true. Yeah, he couldn't have killed her because basically the Fitbit showed him he got up like 2 or 3 times, maybe to go to the bathroom, check on the baby, he went back to bed, and that was it. And the Fitbit showed that he was sleeping. There was yet another device that seemed to support Dietrich's innocence as well. An insurance company tracking device known as Snapshot that was installed on Vander Hayden's car. The information downloaded from the Snapshot indicated that her car had not been driven that night, so he couldn't have driven her to the field because the car hadn't gone anywhere. But if Doug Dietrich didn't kill Nicole Vander Hayden, who did? Whose DNA was left on her clothing and the cord used to kill her? As it turns out, 21st century technology would help answer those questions. In August 2016, investigators were able to recover enough of the unidentified male DNA from one of the victim's socks to send to the national database, and soon they had a name: George Stephen Birch. And this guy, I saw a video of this guy. He was a giant man. He was like 6 feet 8 inches tall. He was huge. He looked tough. He had a long ponytail, and I mean, you know, he was the kind of man that you just didn't want to mess with. You didn't want to pick a fight with at all. And as Brown County Sheriff investigators would soon discover in the early morning hours that Nicole Vanderheyden was murdered, Birch had been carrying a phone with him that contained a treasured trove of incriminating information. Yeah, they were able to ping his phone, and they knew exactly where he was. He was at all the locations. He was by the house where the blood was on the curb. It also showed that his car was at the field where the body was dumped. You know, one interesting story about the body was actually found by two joggers that went out for a morning run, and they had called it in, and the police wanted to absolutely make sure their story checked out. So they actually talked to all the people in the city, and they said, were any of you on the road? Do you have a like a camera recording device where you record where you drive and everything, your vehicle camera? And somebody did have a camera, and they actually recorded the two men jogging down the street, just like they said they had been doing. So they wanted to make sure that these two guys weren't lying about jogging, and they just called it in because, they may have been involved. But anyways, on his phone is a program known as Google Dashboard. The dashboard collects not just cell phone tower data, but also tracks every Wi-Fi hotspot the phone encounters, as well as GPS coordinates. The information on his phone showed that on May 21st, 2016, he was everywhere or very close to where Vanderheyden had been. He started the night at a bar a half mile from where she was last seen, and he was at her home 8 miles away for an hour. He was then at the field where her body was found, and even at a location on the highway where some of her possessions had been discarded. Yeah. Sergeant Slinger was sure he had his man, and in September of 2016, George Birch was charged with intentional homicide of Nicole Vanderheyden. It was also, they had pictures too. Apparently this guy was so evil that he went fishing the next day with his buddies, and they took a picture of him. He caught a fish, and you could actually see defense wounds on his arms and his hands, and he couldn't explain those. He could not explain those defense wounds. Well, he did have a story, but maybe we'll get to that. It would still be a long, winding road to justice, as at his February trial, George Birch and his attorneys raised serious questions about the reliability of the Fitbit and other devices, arguing that prosecutors were relying too much on untested technology. What's more, while Birch admits those devices might show that he was with Nicole, they didn't show who actually killed her. Yeah, this is where the story gets interesting. And he says the killer is Doug Dietrich, the same man police initially suspected. So what he's saying is that, he met the girl at the bar, and then they had drinks, and then she just said, "Hey, you know what? I am really tired. I just, can you give me a ride home?" And so they hopped into his truck, his pickup truck, and he was also a guy that lived out of state. It's kind of wild how many of these murders seem to happen by people that don't even live in the town or aren't from that town. This was a guy that, he'd served some violent crime. He'd served some time for violent crimes in the past, and he was out now, and he'd been in jail, locked up, and that's how they got his DNA too. I mean, his DNA was already on the registry, for locked up offenders, and so that's how they were able to find out it was his DNA, and that he was, living in Green Bay. He was kind of doing some work in Green Bay, and he was fishing with his buddies. But anyways, his story is that he and the girl were the mother and the girlfriend, they went back by the house, and then he said that they were having sex in his truck, and then that Doug came out, and Doug saw them, and he bashed this guy was big. He was like 6'8", but he claims that he got knocked out, like the guy knocked him out with a pipe or something. He didn't really say what it was. And then when he woke up, he saw that, he was laying next to a dead girl, and he panicked, and he, took her to the field and left her there. With all the new technology used in this case, though, justice for Nicole Vander Hayden would still be determined the old-fashioned way by jury. So, I was looking at the article. I guess that's the end of the article. They didn't explain what actually happened there, but I kind of told you all what had happened. And it would come down to a jury. And the jury did. They didn't buy that guy's story at all. The Fitbit, pretty much proved, and the car just pretty much proved that Doug couldn't have done it. And all the evidence just pointed, convincingly pointed at this guy right here, this George Stephen Birch, and so the jury did find him guilty, and I can't remember what he was sentenced to, but he's going to be locked up for a very long time, no doubt about it. So thought I'd share that story with all of you. That is a Wisconsin story about true crime, and I hope you all, you just never know. I mean, probably not a bad idea to wear your Fitbit and keep your phone with you, and those things might actually save you. So, all right, Wisconsin hugs.